What's up, alumni? Welcome to After 4, your podcast for navigating life after graduation. I'm your host and guide, John Steele. We are well on our way in this health and wellness series. This week, we're tackling the topic of mental health and how to nurture it during this season of major life transition. We're joined by my friend and coworker, Chase Reed, who's going to share some helpful insights for us from her training and professional experience in the mental health field, as well as her own major life transitions over the last few years. And she has some especially great advice about leaning into the one who never changes when everything else feels so unstable. Here's Chase, and this one's for you, alumni. Chase, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, John. Thank you.
Yes, I'm really glad to have you back. It's been a few months since the last time we hung out on a podcast, but here we are again.
Yes, it has. I'm excited to be back. And
Great.
Yeah, this will be fun.
Yes, it absolutely will. So, Chase, for our listeners who maybe didn't catch you this past summer when you joined us for an episode, would you just give us an introduction and help us get to know you a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. My name is Chase Reed. I live in Denver, Colorado with my husband, Will. We have been here for the past 3.5 years now. We moved here from Texas right after graduating from Texas A&M University. I am a therapist, currently not practicing. We'll get into all of that, but I graduated from grad school back in May of this year. And yeah, we live life here in Colorado, skiing, hiking, all of the fun things.
Yes. And I would imagine quite a change moving to Colorado from Texas, a little bit of a different format there.
Yes, definitely. The culture is different. The activities that you do are different. And that's kind of why we moved here. We wanted a little bit of a change of pace.
Nice.
Didn't necessarily move here with the intention of staying, but we love it. And hopefully we'll stay for a really long time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Glad to hear it. Chase, we're going to have a couple of different conversations together in this series. They'll be staggered a few weeks apart. Part one here together, we're going to be talking about mental health and what it looks like to pursue wellness in that realm, which is not a unique topic by any means.
Sure.
But you and I are going to be framing it in terms of transition, what it's looked like to take care of your mental health as you are a recent grad in these early stages of transition. And I'm really excited that you're the one having this conversation with me today and with all of us listening in today for many different reasons. One of them being that, you are well educated, you have a number of experiences, and some of those diverse experiences will play a role in both of our conversations.
Yes.
But you are also just like a few years ahead of the audience that we are talking to, and you've had some significant transitions in your life. Yes. Even just, as you said, moving from Texas to Colorado, getting married, and going to grad school. Like, transition is not unfamiliar territory for you. And so I'm really grateful that you're going to be able to take your fresh wealth of mental health knowledge and apply it to experiences that you've had, and then just share those kind of things with us of like, man, what have you been learning in this space? So I'm excited to have you jump into this conversation with us today.
Definitely. Yeah, that's very true. Lots of transition over the past few years. So
yes,
something I'm very familiar with.
Yes, absolutely. Well, okay, so then let's just jump right in here, Chase. Can you just help us get an idea, in your opinion, and in your personal experience and in some of the learning that you've been doing professionally as well, what are some of the realities around major life transition that might have an impact on someone's mental health and well-being?
Yeah. I think the first thing that comes to mind is that oftentimes transition is marked by the reality that there's a lot of things out of your control. Again, whether it's a job transition or moving from one state to the next or getting married, like relational transitions, there's preparation you can do. There's things that you can anticipate, but ultimately there is a lot that's out of your control. And in human nature, things that are out of our control typically make us pretty uncomfortable. That can be anxiety inducing, either just like the reality that I don't know what's going to happen, or when we anticipate something happening and it doesn't quite go that way. So I think by nature, transition can be pretty unsettling. Even when it's exciting transition, like all of the transitions I've named, like were pretty exciting for the most part. But I think that lack of control can often put us a little bit in some discomfort. So by nature, it can rock us a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember in my days of psychology as well, being in school, I remember talking about things like internal and external locus of control.
Yes.
And of like when basically the way that you perceive the world around you as you are an active participant versus things happening to you.
Yes.
That those can have significant ramifications for mental health, for your relationships, for the way that you just perceive what's coming next for you in life. And so, like, if my thought is like transition is happening to me and I'm just I'm going off into the fog and I have no clue what's happening, it seems like you're much more likely to have a sense of like what kind of bad things could be in store. Or maybe you have a sense of adventure into it of like, all right, I'm ready to take this head on. What could happen next? It's exciting. Versus saying like, here are the things that I'm doing to sort of take the reins and lead myself into transition. So yeah, that those things can play a big role in the way that we interact with what's happening around us in transition.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, internal versus external locus of control is huge. I even think about like a very simple exercise that I would do with clients sometimes when they would talk about, feeling overwhelmed would be it's called sphere of influence. So it's literally you draw a circle and you, in that situation, put inside the circle everything that you actually have control over and everything else that you don't have control over, you put outside of it. And that sounds a lot like very simplified and a lot easier said than done sometimes, but it really is just helpful to visualize, okay, what's actually in my control? And now if with the things that are in my control, I'm doing everything that I can to make that happen, then ideally there would be much less worry. But
Yeah, that's really interesting. It seems like that would provide some clarity, and it also normalizes the reality that there just will be things out of your control.
Yes.
And it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's not because you're bad at transition or whatever. It's just that is the way that it goes. But that if you spend some time clarifying, you will find that there are things that you have influence over as well, and that can be really powerful, even just naming those things. And then you can start developing a plan for, okay, well, what does it look like for me to lean into the control that I have and maybe have some amount of acceptance of the things that I don't and see what could come my way.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Chase, I wonder, so feelings about control, that's one of the things that could have a significant impact on someone's mental health. I mean, are there other things that come to your mind as far as like, these are elements of transition that come up that could have a significant impact that are just important for us to sort of keep our eyes and ears open for during this season?
Another thing that comes to mind is even just changes in routine. And so, again, that could happen with moving to a new place. That can happen with a new job or going maybe to grad school where your life just looks different. Your time looks different. Relationships are changing. And so oftentimes, like routine can be one of those things that we exercise control with. But then when we're forced into a transition that causes those routines to kind of shift around, however life has changed, that can be another thing, at least for me, that can lead to some transition time, even just like getting my footing again.
Yeah, and routine is something that touches like so many parts of our lives, whether or not we even realize it. Like, you get so used to the routine of school, which is you start to get an idea that your experience and your life routine with school is so much bigger than just your college experience. Like, for so many of us, once we graduate, we literally have just come out of like 18 or 19 years of being in a classroom and a structured setting in that way. And all of a sudden, all of that routine and experience is out the window. And just the way that your day flows is like, I have I have never done this before, except for whatever period of time it was between being born and starting school. I was like, that was the last time that I wasn't in a school rhythm. So I literally have no idea how to function outside of like summer schedule or something like that. But that's really short and quick. So yeah, routine and how that can impact like, well, when do I spend time with Jesus now? Because I used to have these gaps in my schedule. Now it's like, do I get up early? I hate getting up early in the morning. When it's late at night, I kind of want to just unplug and be done. It's hard to lean in and be thoughtful. So where do I do that? Where do I spend time with friends? Because again, I could just grab lunch with my friends a few times a week. And yeah, wow, routine. That is a huge one that if we don't have a handle on it, or if we aren't anticipating it being knocked out of whack, that can touch so many different elements of our life and transition.
Definitely. And even you just mentioned friendships, which I was thinking about as well. I think that going from undergrad to life after college was one of the biggest transitions I noticed. Was like, oh, I used to live with my best friends. I used to, if I didn't live with them, saw them all the time or whenever I wanted to, and moving to a new place and having to establish new friendships amidst a much busier schedule where I maybe got to see a new friend once a week, where relationships just take a lot longer time to develop than they did in college when you were seeing each other constantly. And for me, relational health stability has been is a massive part of wellness and mental health. And so, yeah, that can be a big transition. Is it takes time to establish some of that stability.
Yeah, being prepared for certain amounts of loneliness that maybe you weren't anticipating. And just that we know that in our normal everyday lives, people are talking about sort of this loneliness epidemic that we're experiencing. Then you throw in transition on top of that of like, wow, in my everyday life, I'm having trouble connecting maybe to the level that I want to. And now I'm leaving all of the relationships that I had just right there down the hall from me. That is really, and man, loneliness, that can have a significant impact on mental health and sort of your outlook, your social network around you, and people that sort of prop you up and encourage you forward. And that's, relationships, holy cow, that's a huge one that could have a significant impact.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So then, Chase, we've named a number of these things already, and there are many more that we could go through, and some of the ones we've talked like have even further reaching ripple effects than what we've talked about. But I don't want it to feel like doom and gloom of, oh, shoot, you're in transition. And so everything's just going to be really hard, and you're going to have to be prepared to be lonely and out of your routine and, all these things. Like yes, please, alumni, be prepared for some of those things to happen. Yeah. But I also want us to go back to, maybe this takes us a little bit back to some of our locus of control side of things. But there is something around healthy coping strategies. Like that's something that I'd like to spend some time talking about, because so much of life is unknown. These things that we've already talked about, when there are so many areas that can feel out of our control, what do we do? What are some practical strategies that we can lean into that can help us move forward in hope and anticipation of things starting to fall into place? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think first of all, I don't think that any of these things are going to be revolutionary, right? Like totally. This is a conversation that a lot of people are having because a lot of people are seeking wellness and are seeking like stability in their mental health. And so I think, just to name the obvious, but I think that there's something to that this isn't revolutionary. Sometimes we just got to do it, and we got to do it even if it doesn't give us immediate results, because it might just take time. But like you said, back to the internal locus of control, being able to identify in the midst of transition, okay, there are a lot of things that are out of my control, but let's identify what is in my control. And I think let's start with the routine aspect. In the midst of transition, while giving yourself grace for the fact that it's going to take time to figure it out, you're going to try things on. Some things might not fit as well. Some things you might say, oh, I tried that. I don't really think that is best for me. like thinking of it, yeah, trying on different clothes and figuring out, all right, what really fits, what really helps me the most, because everyone will need a different kind of concoction for what is most beneficial. But of course, like just routines of being active. It doesn't have to be the most intense workout regimen, but just moving your body, right? We know with science that these things are helpful. For me, one of the most helpful things really has been spending time with God every day. And that, again, that doesn't have to be a 2-hour quiet time. That can be like 10 minutes in listening prayer in the morning, right? Like, even thinking about transition, we know from the scriptures that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
That's awesome.
And so in the midst of transition, we know that God is the same. That has been a massive comfort for me, that the same God that I met with in high school is the same God that I met with in college and today and will be 10 years from now. He is the same, and that can bring a significant calm even to my body as I say that right now. Yeah, of course, diet, those things. But I think also one thing that I would say is like leaning into, I mentioned the relational stability, moving to a new place. And, you know, my story being more open is like, right, I moved here knowing a couple friends from college. At the time, my boyfriend was also moving to the same place. There was a few touch points I had of people that I knew and felt familiar to me. But for the most part, it was new, right? I joined a church and most of those people were new. And so we hear this all the time about transition after college, but the friendships do take time. But for me, that was a priority in the way that I spent my time, was investing in relationships, being patient with their growth. But and ultimately, that is why we've loved living here so much, is because of the community that we have. But it took time. It took time in like small deposits when, you know, getting lunch with someone was awkward still because you kind of knew them, kind of didn't. And now those are some of my closest friends. So, those are the things that I would say are really important in investing in, so that, like you said, helpful coping strategies, but just to establish some of that, like safety in a new place, in a new routine, all of those things.
Yeah, it seems like when it comes to things like, it feels like establishing routine and being thoughtful about the way that you establish your routine could have such wide sweeping benefits. That almost, I wonder if it could be helpful for people to, like they would with a budget for their finances, to sit down and sort of like map out their week and to establish like, okay, this is the time that I'm at work. This is the time that I'm going to allot for sleep, so that I know I'm getting a solid amount of sleep every night, because we know in every aspect of wellness, sleep is like like sleep, diet, and exercise. Those are like the top 3 things.
Right.
If you want to feel healthy, if you want to feel better, do those 3 things. So what can you do to start scheduling those things in, and not just scheduling in solo healthy things, but scheduling in, okay, here's where I'm going to go to church. This is where I'm going to test out a Bible study. This is where I'm going to go to some community event that's going on. I'm going to see if I can connect with people who have similar hobbies and things that I like to do, and testing some of those places out and just saying, this is where it happens in my schedule. I'm going to do it so that I can start developing some consistency. I start developing some relationships. I'm getting sleep. I'm eating well, and I'm spending time with Jesus on a regular basis. And it seems like giving yourself grace in the midst of those things too. Like live an empirical life. That's what I remember. One of my professors in undergrad talking about: live an empirical life. Just experiment, and maybe empirical isn't a term that everybody's familiar with, but sort of like, here's an idea, let me put it to the test and gather data to see how it does for me, see if this works for me. And you mentioned that, like, maybe there are things that you'll try and they won't work, and it's okay. That's real life for all of us. So like, give them a couple of tries. I also have many professors that say you have to have 3 points of data. Like 3 data points is a trend. So
Yes.
so try something 3 times, and if it sucks 3 times, then okay, scratch it off the list.
Yep.
And then move on to the next thing and realize that like it's not you, it's that thing, and just keep trying. It's okay. Experiment, be empirical, give things a try, and just keep moving forward with sort of working out what that schedule and that routine looks like on a regular basis.
Right. And in the same spirit, I'm thinking of if any listeners are like me and hear this conversation and they're overachievers or like, great, I'm going to go do all of these things starting tomorrow. I'm never going to stop. Good advice always in this, as we're talking about these things, is like, man, start small. Like maybe there's just a few things you need to focus on, and maybe it's sleep, maybe it's working out, or just being intentionally active 2 times a week. It's like, I would encourage not shooting for the stars right away, because oftentimes that can kind of set you up for failure and potentially just leave you disappointed right away and then giving up completely. So SMART goals are another very tangible thing we talk about in counseling often, but something that is specific, measurable, attainable, reasonable, and time bound. These goals that, like I said, I think a big one is the attainable aspect, that like, okay, I can do that. And slowly building the goal over time. Is an important note in there.
Yeah, that's great. And for people who maybe this is your first episode joining us in this series, it would be super helpful to go back and listen to our conversation with Mackenzie, because she talks us through some of those exact steps of how she's a health and wellness coach. She walks people through the process of identifying what are the 1 or 2 things that you really want to lean into and make a realistic action plan for, and what does it look like to execute that plan well. So yeah, as you're hearing Chase talk about those things, if you don't know how to put a plan like that together well, go back, catch that episode. Mackenzie will get you up to speed, and then you can start putting some of these things into practice right away. Chase, how do you think that tending to our mental health in transition helps us keep saying yes to Jesus after graduation?
Yeah, I love this question. I think, honestly, a lot of my time in grad school, so I got my master's in clinical mental health counseling at a seminary, which is unique. I think a lot of my time in grad school was spent considering that kind of broader question of how does my discipleship to Jesus interact with focusing on mental health and psychology? Because I think we're seeing this a lot, right? In our time right now, I think when it comes to being a Christian and considering mental health, as we're walking this path, there's kind of 2 ditches on either side, where on one of the ditches is my mental health doesn't matter. Like God's taking care of me. I don't need to consider that at all. And on the other side of the road is a ditch that is my mental health is everything, and introspection, self-awareness is everything.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'm still trying to figure out what that road is, and how to stay on the road and not fall into either ditch.
Yes.
So I'm definitely not doing it perfectly, but I do think there is a real reality to where that, like, God meets us in the sometimes dark spaces of our minds, where we are feeling anxious, where we're feeling scared, where we're feeling depressed and lonely, right? All these things that we've talked about. God has a desire to meet us there. And even though we're seeing all these stats, especially for Gen Z, seeing all these stats about like how we're the anxious generation, all of these things that are true data points. I don't believe that is what God desires for us. I don't think that we need to just submit to, okay, this is going to be our story. And I actually think that there's a lot of ways that God desires to meet us there, and say, hey, I have more for you. And so, frankly, in periods where I've struggled mentally, those mornings before the sun was up with God have been some of the most powerful encounters I've had with God. And so I think what I would just say is, as we become a little more self-aware, as we step into, okay, what is actually going on inside me? the only place that we can meet with God is in our present actual reality, not in our idealized reality. And so inviting the Lord into that space inside of us is, I've found to be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, that's so great. And it's like, I think many people would probably consider, their mental health, the things that are going on internally, to be sort of the deepest, most central parts of who they are.
Right.
And to say that, like, as I lean into this in healthy ways that keeps me in the middle of that road, not falling into either one of those ditches, that I am taking steps of inviting Jesus into the deepest parts of who I am. And he's already there. That's the thing, is that we invite Jesus in, we find out that he's already sitting on the couch. That he's which sitting on the couch is a funny thing to say as we're talking about mental health. That's not really the imagery I was going for there. But yeah, very, very Freudian. I didn't mean that. But he's already present with us in the places that we are inviting him into. But what does it look like to purposefully submit those things to him and say, like, God, these things belong to you. And maybe, yes, these are some of the realities of my generation and things that maybe could be pitfalls for us, but I am not defined by or consigned to a future of anxiety and just always being afraid of what's going on. Fear is the wrong word. Fear is a different thing. But of always being, like, struggling and feeling anxious about what's happening to me. Where am I going next? What does that look like? And saying, like, man, God, you are guiding me in transition, in the unknown, in the places that I do have some control. You know me in my deepest, innermost places, because you made those places, and you are with me in it. And that leaning into our mental health in a healthy way actually just leans us deeper into the places that God already exists with us.
Yes, exactly. Well said.
So then, Chase, as you think about our alumni who are in this season of transition, some of them are, like, totally crushing it. Some of them are feeling completely lost. But I imagine that all of them would benefit from a word of encouragement or a final insight maybe that you have. Is there one last pastoral word or professional word in your field that you would give to an alum in transition right now?
Yeah, I really would just say, like, wherever you're at, whether, like you said, whether you're crushing it or whether you have no idea where to go right now, bring that to the Lord. Allow him to meet you there. I think about, like, sitting down with God and offering him whatever it is I have in the moment, and believing, like, okay, he wants to meet me right there. He wants to meet me when I wake up after a night of not sleeping, and wondering how I can make it through this day of work. And he wants to meet me when I feel totally at peace. I'm really satisfied with my relationships. I'm crushing it at work. He wants to meet you there. He is the present God with us every day in whatever our circumstances are. I think that will do a lot more for, like, I think the way that we understand God and how he relates to us really does change so much about, like, the peace in our minds, the peace in our bodies. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I love that. And it takes me right back to something you said earlier about, like, in the midst of transition where everything is different, God is the same. And that we can lean in, we can hold on to that. And what does it look like to invite the God who is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow into this time, like, to hold nothing back from him and say, like, man, just walk this road with me, please. That is a great encouragement for sure. Whether you're listening, whether you're in transition or not, as you're listening, that's a good word for all of us, for all of us to take with us. Chase, thanks so much for joining us for this conversation. Thanks for bringing your experiences, and thanks for coming back in just a few weeks here. I'm excited for us to hear more about some of your own experiences and how. I don't want to blow too many punchlines here. I'll wait and just let you tell the story in a couple of weeks. But I'm excited for you to come back and share a little bit more of your experience in this most recent season. So. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you very much, Chase.
Cool. Thanks, John.
Alumni, when everything is changing, hold on to the one who is always the same. If you're unsure about a job, your calling to follow Jesus with everything you have is still the same. If you're having trouble finding friends, Jesus is the friend who never leaves you. And remember that no matter where you are, God has already gone before you. I'm not saying that eliminates anxiety or cures sadness and depression brought on by transition, but what I am saying is that we have a hope, and that hope is stable and reliable. So when we feel anxious and lost in this life, and we will have seasons of feeling that way from time to time, we know that we can depend on the one who never changes to guide our steps, even when the terrain feels unfamiliar and uncertain. Chase, thanks so much for joining us this week. I'm looking forward to hanging out again in a few weeks to hear more of your story. Alumni, come back next week for a conversation around what I think might be a unique or unexpected component of wellness: intellectual wellness or discipleship of the mind. What does it mean to exercise our minds and to grow as people who love God with our minds? Come back next time to find out. Until then, consider sharing this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and I will see you in the after, alumni. Thanks for listening to After 4. This podcast is brought to you by the InterVarsity Alumni Relations Team, hosted and produced by John Steele, production assistance by Mike Centera, edited by Caleb Leppert, and our After 4 theme music was written and performed by John Steele.